Hey everyone, thanks for joining us at UNC. Today's episode is all about letting go of our heroes. We start with your hosts, Zan and Salala, with our segment, What's Your Goal?, which sets the stage for the conversation. Our guests join us just around 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the episode if you want to skip ahead. There's no reflect and deconstruct segment this episode. As you guessed it, this is a two-parter. Look out for part 2 of Letting Go of Our Heroes, where we get into how we all idolize Beyonce and much, much, much more. Enjoy the show.
Hey, and welcome back to the show. I'm Salala.
And I'm Zan.
And
this is UNC.
We want UNC to be a place where we can visualize and work through uncomfortable conversations while teaching each other how to become better at uncomfortable conversations through reflections and receipts. In this episode, we have guests joining us to discuss how to let go of your heroes. This week, we have an opera producer, a stunt performer, an engineer, and an actor joining us for the discussion.
Our episode today is broken into 3 segments: checking in with your hosts in What's Your Goal?, jumping into the UNC with our guest panel, and then we close with our R&D segment where we reflect on what was discussed and deconstruct common mistakes in UNCy conversation from today's episode.
So if you haven't already, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel on YouTube and on your podcast platform of choice, as it helps our podcast UNC grow. All right, let's get into it. So Zan, what's your goal for today's episode and for this conversation?
I'm really interested to hear how people have evolved in how they think about heroes, because I'm somebody who, my hero complex has been very minimized throughout my life. So I always find it really interesting to hear who people idolize in that hero sense. Both those who are really close to them, people you know personally, and people in the wider mainstream visual. And so I'm excited to hear about people's experiences with heroes. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I think my goal is that I'm not sure I can vocalize how to let go of a hero. And so I hope that I can, through learning from others, our guests that are going to join us today, sort of where to start vocalizing that, because I know that I have let go of people, or just said, released them from my need to idolize them. But it's an interesting conversation because I think it's definitely deep rooted into our system, idolizing people. And I don't know if I have the words for that yet. So that's something that I'd like to accomplish. We're going to have some guests join us in a couple of seconds, and we'll be back.
UNC. What about that?
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us at UNC. We're going to go quickly around and have you all introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Antoine. I'm acknowledging the native land of Tongva, based out of Gardena, California. I guess my background is in engineering. So I worked at Boeing for some time. I also did a little stint in stunt performing. My UNC, I would say my UNC is when people use their zodiac signs to describe their character. I'm like, no, but that's you. That's don't lump me in this.
Hi, I'm Mariel, also known as Nene. I'll be referred to as Nene. I acknowledge the land of the Munsee Lenape people here in Long Beach, New York. Beautiful, sunny Long Beach, New York. My UNC is active listening. I'm always thinking of what I'm going to say next, and sometimes miss very important things that other people say, and I'm really trying to not do that anymore. And I hope this conversation helps me be able to do that.
What's up, guys? I'm John Clay III. I acknowledge the land of Piscataway. I'm currently in Clinton, Maryland with my girlfriend's family for a little bit, quarantining with the family. And I would say I'm an artist for sure. My UNC would definitely have to be my tone sometimes. It can be very matter of fact when really it's just my opinion. And I just feel like that's something I need to gauge a little better. And I hope this conversation also helps me, do that.
Me too. Ooh.
I guess, what's up, everybody? Rashaun Riley here, representing the land of the Peoria people here in Detroit, Michigan. My UNC It'd be kind of the same as Nene. I think active listening. Oftentimes, uh, tend to definitely have an opinion before the person has fully expressed themselves. So, hopefully, here I can practice that of like, hey, is this exactly what you meant? So make sure I'm accurately responding to what the person is trying to express. So, yeah, excited to be here. Excited to dive in.
Oh, us too. So, on today's topic, we're discussing letting go of our heroes. There are lots of different parts of that. And so, we're going to talk about artists, we're going to talk about athletes, politicians, and our family. But before we start, I wanted to ask you, what makes a hero? What determines for you what a hero is?
I'd say probably individualism, following their own path and just making their own path out of nothing and just, following their heart and their dreams regardless of what the outside forces or society say to them. That's what defines a hero to me, is because that can be very difficult at times.
I guess for me, I tried to do a little homework before I hopped on. So I actually looked at the definition because I was curious, and it looks like it says a person who is admired for great or brave acts or fine quality.
Great acts. Yeah, I feel like it's like if someone's authentic, right? Like if no one has come before them, it doesn't feel like they're a copycat. But that doesn't mean that they've done anything really great. So I think that also I'm trying to think it has to do something about their activity, like what they've put into the world too, has to be part of it, at least for me. Because you can be authentic as hell and be not do nothing. You can be like super funny and authentic with your humor and do shit.
Mm.
Yeah, I was going to say excellence, and it doesn't need to be like the greatest in the world, but as long as you strive to be the best at what you're doing, or strive to be the best that you can be at what you're doing, no matter what it is, whether it's an athlete or whether an artist, or even just being the best teacher, being the best person that you can be. I think that makes a difference for me. The best parent.
What she said.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same as everyone says. Like the authentic piece, I think is important because I think we're probably going to dive into it. But heroism is kind of subjective and relative to the person that believes that person is a hero. Not the cliche like Superman, Batman, like they're just saving the day all the time. It's like it's something that connects to your identity, and for someone to connect to your identity, they gotta really strongly believe in their own identity authentically. So yeah, I feel that excellence piece, authentic piece as well.
So I just want to ask a question, and we're going to get into this, but when I think of heroes, their one act defines the rest of their life. Their one act, that one thing that they did that was great. Do you agree or not agree with that? Okay, jump into why, John Clay.
I disagree because I feel like heroes, what makes a hero is that they have these acts continuously. Like they are continuously, at least to me, heroes are people who either have a formula and are sticking with it and are just with that formula creating even better and just perfecting their own formula in a way, or per se, they're just reinventing themselves in general and just every time they create something. I'm speaking in terms of artists in general at this point because like I just love when an artist, in particular, Kanye West, who is like my hero, and I have a lot of issues with that man, but like at the end of the day, I'm from Chicago, and this man put my city on the map again, along with another. But I'm gonna stick to Kanye for now. Kanye, he is always been my hero. He's very consistent with reinventing himself, and that's just something I've always admired because when you're a mogul like that, it's hard to create something new and to do things that no one else per se has done before. And I think that you can only accomplish that by doing more than one thing, to get back to what we were talking about.
I can respect both. I guess I kind of look at it also like kind of in the music world where it's like you have your one hit wonders, which they still have a heavy hitter, you still love it. And then you have a guy who has like, a decent catalog. I mean, I can respect both. I mean, you still put like, your best foot forward. And even when it comes to heroism, I mean, I think it all depends on how extreme you go. Like, I mean, if somebody like saved somebody from a burning building and that was like their one act, and I'm like, yeah, you're good in my book, homie. I mean, you put your life on the line. So I think it's all, I guess, I don't know who said it's relative. It might have been Rashaun. It might have said it's just all relative, I think. So I guess it depends on what field we're talking as well. But I can respect both.
I think there's a lot to be said about then if you have one act that's negative, does that cut the rest out? And I want y'all to think about that because I want to get back into that later.
So for this next portion of the show, we want to do a little bit of quick fire. So separated into 3 categories: artists, athletes, and politicians that are going to be represented in this quick fire. What level of praise would you give them? 5 being hero status and 1 being human status. Hold your hand up in the screen like this.
Human for human status, is that just like they should just go back to being normal people who we don't follow or care about in the limelight? Okay.
So that they're allowed to make mistakes too.
Yeah. Who you personally, not what you think society deems as a hero, but who you personally think, whether they should remain hero status or whether they should go back to being human status. Okay, everybody ready?
Get uncomfortable. 8.
All right, Kanye. Okay. Tiger Woods.
Ooh.
Rashaun's like slow quick fire. Considered quick fire. I love it. Harvey Weinstein.
Yes, Nay.
R. Kelly. All right. Michael Jackson. All right. Don't look at other people's answers. Base it on how you feel. Donald Trump.
Yeah, let's just add the 0 in because it's valid.
We're getting a lot of zeros in this game, I have to say. George Bush Jr. Roseanne.
I feel like I'm judging myself with my answers.
Roseanne, I'm sorry, Roseanne. Oh, she said that. Oh, yeah, never mind. Okay.
There you go. Welcome.
It is. I know Roseanne.
Ellen DeGeneres. Hero to human status. What do we think?
How about to decide? Think about it.
This is a quick fire. I know that there's a lot to think about, but quick fire right now. Later, but... All right.
Okay, I'm going to count down. You say the name, I'm going to go 3, 2, 1. You got to give an answer.
Okay. Michael Fassbender.
3, 2, 1.
All right. Ready? Kevin Spacey.
3, 2, 1. Ooh.
Okay. Bill Clinton.
3, 2, 1.
All right. And last but not least, Beyonce.
3, 2, 1.
Interesting. Really interesting.
Okay, so here's the question. Where do you draw the line between judging someone and their personal life versus public life? We can look at some of these people. If any of these people stood out to you that you really, really have a personal feeling about, jump in. But like Tiger Woods had a personal thing go on that we all judged him for. R. Kelly had a personal thing that went on, but we judge him differently. Where do we draw the line, and how has that affected your community?
Obviously, hindsight changes a couple of these. And so how does it affect, like, currently, how do you feel? And maybe how did you feel differently at the time? I think George Bush Jr. is like a perfect example of that. So
didn't fall in love with Man in the Mirror when I knew about the documentaries. Jump in, it's gonna get unky.
Yeah. I would say, I think for me, this is one of the reasons why I had a difficult time with the rapid fire, because I'm trying to, I think depending on the mindset I was answering the question would kind of dictate which way on the scale I was. Because the way I answered it is like, at the end of the day, I kind of wanted everyone to kind of not have that hero status. It's almost like we're all human. So that's why I was kind of tempted to put one up every time, because I think society has gotten to the place where I think they start to lump idolism as well as like into heroism, when I think they should be separated. And I think that's kind of been my hang up even with the exercise. I'm like, yeah, like on a scale of 5, like, yeah, I mean, musically, like, out of this world, but as a human, you're still a one in my book. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. Yeah, so I guess to fully answer your question, Lalo, like where you draw the line, I think the line is, I guess for me, has always been there, always looking at someone as just, hey, you are human, because even when I think about like civil rights activists, a lot of people don't know that, or maybe they do know that Malcolm X himself, I mean, he was a pimp and beat women before he made his claim to fame. I think it's just because his past wasn't as much publicized or put out there as much. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll say that similarly. I mean, I put 5 up for Beyonce just because I mean, a lot of the people that we listed were like sex criminals and war criminals. So it was like I sort of couldn't put her on the same level. But even at 5, like I still know like she's human. She makes mistakes and will continue to make mistakes. But but of all the rest of those, I mean, she's pretty innocuous. But somebody, like you said, like Tiger Woods, yeah, that was like personal to him. I think where I draw the line really is consent and war crimes. Yeah, it's probably where with a lot of those people, Kevin Spacey, R. Kelly, Bill Clinton, all those people, it's Harvey Weinstein, it's about consent. And then George W. Bush, it's about war crimes.
Mm-hmm.
I say for me, it's really just a case by case scenario for me, because I try to like look at these humans based off of their given circumstances and where they were brought up and who they were raised by and all these things, try to give them back their humanity, because it's easy to strip people of their humanity in these topics of discussion because we are pinpointing very specific actions that they have done or that have caused harm to certain people, but that's not necessarily what they've done their entire lives. So it's easy to get lost in their acts, no matter how big, and those acts deserve to be highlighted for sure. I just wish that that scrutiny would be met with the same, kindness with their past and just how they were, like how they became to be how they are. And that's why it gets a little murky with me with the whole Michael Jackson thing, because also it's just weird because they call that a documentary and it's not really a documentary. It's after he died, he passed away. So it's just super murky, and like all these things are clouding this man's legacy. And obviously this man was clearly weird and clearly probably a pedophile, like very strongly a pedophile. It's just like the fact that we are so willing to cancel these people and so like gung-ho about getting rid of their legacies, even though they've done monstrous things or been accused of monstrous things. How do we, I'm struggling with getting back to their humanity. And that's where I always try to come back to, is to make sure that I'm taking it a case by case situation and like where they came from, how they got from point A to point B, and if this is really 100%, basically all their choices are 100% their fault, but like, seeing the environment around their circumstances and things like that.
You don't think that pedophilia, extreme pedophilia, multiple cases of it, is worth us scrutinizing somebody's artistry?
Oh, definitely. You can scrutinize his artistry. I'm just talking about the whole cancel thing, like just being like, nope, can't play his stuff. Nope, can't do that. Nope, can't even talk about it. Nope, can't do this. Are we even fixing anything by just being like, no, we can't even talk about it,
And that's different when the money still goes somewhere, right? Like Michael Jackson, his past, we're talking about his legacy. And I think that's a real important word to bring up, because legacy is shrouded with this shining like ray of sunshine that it's supposed to be, instead of us as a society being okay with their legacy being both things, not being one dimensional, right? But I think also like R. Kelly, I don't want to play his music because he is still to this day paying people off with the money I'm giving him. And I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with that.
He doesn't own the rights to his music though. Like, I'm just letting you know. Anybody who like plays his music, that money's not going in. That's going to the record labels. He sees none of that. Just being
it's
honest.
Not going to him at all. Like,
no.
And when did that happen?
I think he got bought out because he violated his contract like 3 years ago, something like that.
Okay, so but we've known about R. Kelly for longer than 3 years.
Absolutely.
And like when we talk about specifically, and I'm just going to add this in here because prepping this conversation, when Zan and I talking about the people we're going to talk about, I was getting very frustrated because the society puts a higher level of judgment on Black people than they do on most others. All I did was bring up Black people. And I was like, now hold up a second. I was really annoyed. I was like, San, like, who are the white people that we need to be holding accountable, because we're so ready to do it with Black people? But I do think specifically in the Black community and the Black aunties that are out here that will find any excuse, because their music and their artistry created memories. We cannot then say, and let's let them go.
I was gonna say, it's interesting because my hero complex is very small. Like, if I hear, like, I swing back and forth, like, based on how I feel. If I'm listening to Michael Jackson's music and I for a second think about pedophilia, I'm changing the music. I'm not listening to it. Like, I'm not gonna get into a large existential personal conversation about it. I'm just, whatever how I'm feeling about that right now. And I think that that's applied across politics, artistry, athleticism. Like, for me, I'm not having a huge conversation about it. If it affects my experience at all, like, I'm just not even approaching it. But I do think that it's really interesting, now that we're starting to uncover vocally, altogether, societally, all these parts of history. So as we were prepping the show, I was talking a lot about politicians, Jefferson and Washington, and their contributions to slavery, and their names being reflected in conversation about progressive, really important, heroic leaders within the history of America. I scrutinize politicians almost more than I do anybody else. Like, I feel like, all right, until I hear otherwise, I'm not really going to be about listening to their music, or I'm not really going to be about, like, watching the game and enjoying it in the same way that I would have. But that's not a forever feeling. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not committing myself in cement to that emotion forever. That's just however I'm feeling right now. That's how I'm approaching listening or watching or absorbing that person.
I just want to say two things. One, going back when you were saying how we went through our decisions and how we came up with our different grades or whatever. I think a lot of it definitely has to do kind of what I started off with, of like, it's gonna be a little philosophical, of just like, what does that person mean to you? And I, like, when we said, was it Roseanne?
Mm-hmm.
I got to even think about her, and I just went to her, like, negative case. I'm like, oh, she doesn't mean that much. So I didn't have that deep affinity, but more complex the person is and their identity and what they brought to my value to my life as a Black man. Like, yeah, I'll go to bat. And now this is where I want to split off from a more philosophical standpoint, is like, anything I say after this, like, I'm not protecting what they did just because I'm questioning things. Is more of, I'm more challenging the fact of, are we accurately assessing this person based on people who are accusing them for such situations? And just to get to my example was Kobe Bryant. It came out after that whole case that it was false, it was lied, but he dealt with 2 years or more, even more of that, through the courts, through issues as a Black man, this club to death on ESPN in our community, and it came out to be false. And it's like, dang, how many, that brings the question of, like, when we talk about accused, how much are we holding on to that, and how much are we holding the accused stuff to Black people? Like, that is that, like, they're still just accused. From my understanding, Michael Jackson is still just accused. But I could be totally wrong. I've been on the legal side. And the other thing is to think about is all the heroes in the past that we look at and that are coming up. Like, what about Da Vinci? Like, these people, way back in the Renaissance era, these artists, you don't know what they're doing. You don't know. And so they survived this whole thing because we don't have social media and everything. Even present day today, how many politicians around us that we vote for, we don't know what they're doing until the light comes out. And it's like, as soon as something comes out, that's when which actually so, is that when we separate ourselves from it. But I just want to separate, I truly believe, and I love this challenge of, like, I separate the artist from the person. What that person brought to me at that time period, I'll listen to their songs, but who they are, I don't vibe with. And I don't need to say that because I like Kanye, because I want to step in the name of love, doesn't mean that I'm promoting, what he does. I absolutely don't. Yeah, so sorry.
But at what point, like, because I feel like art is a replication of this person's life and what they will, like, want to happen in their life and what they perceive life as to be for them. And I feel like I don't really, as idealistic as that sounds to me, to separate the artist from the art, I think they're inseparable because that person's life influenced how they made their art. And
I
so
agree.
that in itself, I have to think about both. Now, I can't separate the two no matter how hard I try. Even with Ye, like, he's always been selfish. He's always been about himself. He's always been about using the culture to get his own, stuff off the ground. And that's something I had to be okay with because the music was fire, bruh. Like, it was fire to me. Growing up in Chicago and hearing all that stuff all the time, like, that stuff was just my life. So I was just like, you know what, cool. I'm 9 years old bumping it. I'm like, whatever, you doing all this for you, cool. Like, I'm here. He helped me with my ego. Like, he helped me sort of have my own confidence. And like at the end of the day, he's still doing some wild shit out here. Like, And so I think it's, in my opinion, it's sort of dangerous to separate the two because the artist literally gets their art from their lives. And I don't think they're separable.
I think you're also saying like the comparison of one event versus lots of different effects. Like what I keep hearing when you're talking about Ye is like the impact that he had on your life and your community's life, like far outweighs the stuff that's going on currently. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Nah, that ain't what I'm saying.
Oh.
I don't think it outweighs it because it also I think it just makes it more difficult for me to actually appreciate him as an artist because it's because his art right now to me is suffering because his personal life is suffering. Like he's suffering at home because his personal. He's suffering in his business, like music wise, because he's suffering at home. Like it's
last 2 albums were trash.
Awful. Like, but I'm not gonna lie. I can tell you about 6 songs over there that I forced myself to love. Like, I tell you. Like,
I like one quick thing to vibe in. Just respond there is that what you said to me, like that whole thing, and it's probably gonna be a pattern of mine. Is like I think it is to us. It's very subjective. Out of this whole conversation because it's subjective, but like to keep it 100 is like it'd be weird. It's different if when Kobe went through his acquisition, it's not acquisition, but when he was accused of the situation he was in, and I'm going to school the next day rocking 24, and I'm like doing all Kobe Bryant kind of stuff, and I'm like, yeah, he's not wrong for that, or like whatever you're supporting for the person and supporting the art or the athlete or the politician, whatever, is like I think it's to you the like kind of the beauty of eye beholder type stuff is like. I'm not dancing to R. Kelly thinking about, I think to your point, is the opposite can be true. It's like I'm not also dancing and thinking that about pedophilia. Now, if I am and I'm dancing to it, that's something wrong. But you will never know because you're not in my head. You know what I mean? So I think it's, to the person at that point in time and how they feel and how they connect with the art. Now, if you connect with the art through the negative stuff that they're doing, that's clearly wrong. But I think to your point, John, definitely is like, I think it's each his own have to navigate that, separating the artist from, if you can't, then that's you and move on from that. But if you can, then enjoy your art and not do that weird shit. You know what I'm saying?
I just want to jump in and say, like, when we're talking about cancel culture, I think, bringing up Da Vinci and the people that have not been ridiculed because we haven't been able to have Twitter, to have a very socially connected conversation. I think cancel culture really was about or is about requiring us as society to be better at holding people accountable. And then it became this like concrete, yes or no, we gonna fight for you or we gonna kick you to the curb place. And there are some other conversations right now, like I think that YouTube star Jenna Marbles, I don't watch YouTube, so I just learned about her during this, but she, for me, and to jump in and answer the question too about what my line is, for me it's like how you're abusing your authority, right? Because one, we tend to think that people who make great music and great memories are the only ones out there. Like I had to have a lot of discussions about R. Kelly with my friends because they were like, their music is amazing. I'm like, let me send you the playlist of other people with good music in the same vibe. Like it's okay for you to just listen to other things if you really, really want to like, if this is attention thing, like, you can replace this. There are more people in the world. We tend to, celebrity world, there's the one percenters. And so we see this small group of people that we have to hold all of our love and joy to, when it's like, that's not necessary. But two, cancel culture has required for us to say, you're never allowed to change. Versus with Jenna Marbles, she came out and said, these are the things I'm doing because I've learned my lessons, because I'm working on, I'm redeeming myself. And then you have to go through that, right? If you're going to abuse your position, right? Kevin Spacey, yada, yada. And you hear a bunch of, men say, well, what's going to happen to us all now? Like, one thing of trouble and then we're gone forever? No, but you don't get to jump back to your position of power right away. You have to then do your research, do your healing, do your growth, and climb again, because there are more of us out here ready to shine and use that power correctly. And I just wanted to add that, because I got uncomfortable thinking about Kobe in our prep. I didn't even want to talk about Kobe, because for me, Gail just asked the question too early. The man died yesterday. Like, we didn't get to mourn in greatness. R. Kelly, we waited 15 years. Why did it have to be for something that was also private, right? It wasn't an abuse of power in the same way, but that's my uncomfortability, I think, with cancel culture.
Yeah, that's a great point about separating the art from the artist and redemption and people growing. But I think also a little bit of an unky point to make about the people we rapid fired on is that most of the women that were named were canceled for, like Roseanne for political comments, for Ellen for an abusive work relationship, not sexually abusive that we know of, but a really toxic work environment. We could have said people like Paula Deen or Margaret Thatcher or Phyllis Schlafly, and we didn't say those people necessarily, but a lot of the men that we've brought up have done literally illegal things. Mm-hmm. And I think that also makes a big difference, and also in the accountability of like what people get canceled for, accountability that hasn't happened for men and still doesn't happen. Like, only 3% of rapists go to jail and all of these statistics. And I think it was cancel culture, like you said, started out as a way to help hold people accountable and for us to hold people accountable. And yeah, it's like the pendulum has really swung far to the other side where people can't be redeemed. But I don't think that we should let go of cancel culture completely, because men know that the things they're doing these men know that the things that they're doing are wrong.
I think that the next question is really about the hero complex that allows us to let some people off the hook and condemn others. Why don't we judge people in the same court? Why don't we hold people to the same standards? And I think that when we first were talking about this, Salala and I, we were talking about men or athletes, like two men, but actually you bring up a great point, women and men, and why are we canceling women to such an extreme when men who are doing illegal things are not being canceled? So yeah, do we want to talk a little bit about that? Why we as a society can't hold people to the same standards, or maybe we are headed in that direction? What do you guys feel about that?
I think that the power structures currently in place are a way for a lot of men to get out of the trouble that they've caused. I think so. I mean, American society was built by white men, and the judicial system, the justice system was made by them to take certain people out of society and to not hold themselves accountable. So I think it really starts there.
Ben.
I guess I'll chime in there. I think what I've also noticed too is that I guess this goes to like what comes to mind is like the biblical verse, like, he who without sin cast the first stone. And I think when it comes to even the whole societal aspect, I've noticed that there are a lot of things that became, I guess a norm because it was, whoever was most vocal about the situation. And then I started to even observe cases where, people weren't holding themselves accountable too, but because, they have more voice, it's also been at a case where stuff was swept under the rug. And the reason why I say that is because, like, I did some digging myself, like even when they look at the Me Too movement, I noticed that whoever was like, I guess the most, I guess publicized, like say, let's say Harvey Weinstein was being, scrutinized, which I totally agree with. And then when I did some more digging and just reading, I was like, wait a second, a person who was claimed to be a leader of the movement, I think Asia Argento, apparently she has an allegation herself with this, I think a Jimmy Bennett guy who came out, I think he was like 17 years old, and said that, hey, this woman, made an inappropriate advance on me when I was 17 years old. And it almost frightens me a little bit that, somebody who's a leader of a movement has something like that on their plate. And what the guy Jimmy Bennett's saying is almost very like similar to what a lot of women were saying. They feel like, hey, I don't think they're going to take me seriously because I'm a guy, and they're also going to say that, I'm 17 years old. So I think a lot of it has to deal with how I see it is like, I guess the whole social media and society, whoever has the most voice, I've noticed that they tend to take that, that mantle. And I think at the end of the day, we have to be sure that we're still holding the people accountable, even the ones who are voicing a movement, and not being careful that we're not like being introspective ourselves. That's just, my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Nene, like 100% right. I mean, I think, it's huge disparities in terms of like how women are policed, women are kind of criticized. Obviously, I think all of us here, and even I think it kind of across both genders, kind of hold that standard, that wrong standard to a degree. But it was interesting. He said like, was it Ellen? Ellen's probably the most recent kind of thing I got familiar with it. And again, also, I'm not super informed on being accused versus being actually did something wrong. Like a lot of people are being accused of doing something wrong, but do we stop at them being accused or actually like the legal, sentence or whatever have you? When I watch Ellen and I see diversity, LGBTQ, like so many standards of her identity are just so awesome and to see that, and I want to see that continue going. I think it kind of ties in, I'm somewhat all over the place, but it kind of ties into also the Black identity thing that we're talking about. It's like a lot of these folks, these heroes, we want Sean, Martin Luther King, he did some wrong stuff, MLK, all that stuff. We want to see Sean because that influences us and inspires us that we can take the mantle and be leaders, such as what Ben is saying. And so like it's like being a little bit careful, like you canceling everybody, then like who we have to look up to. Meanwhile, white men, they have, what I'm saying, got a whole bench, start a lineup, whole, what I mean? Like they have everything, founders, what I'm saying? It's also funny, like in science class, like you look at their books. I remember going to a chemistry class and we go through history of different chemists. It's like, why am I passionate about this? I don't see my identity here. I'm like, dang, like that would be dope if I saw my identity here. So we look at all these different fields and, from politics to athletes and entertainment and stuff and how that motivates the culture and the youth. Cancel culture could be an enemy to an extent where we can separate the artists and say, hey, you can be this, but don't be that. So it's kind of a balance. And I do love what Lala said about people who have the intentionality of actually taking the steps and being vocal about it. Like, some people close the door like, hey, I've been doing this work, but like actually showing the work, because you are a leader in that position. Like you need to show what you have done because you also show what you've done wrong. So that was a lot, but I do agree with you, Nene, on the disparities between women and men, and we should definitely, that should be in a conversation for sure.
Just to piggyback off of that, that's the thing with R. Kelly that is so troubling, is that the fact that he has continuously denied it over and over and over and over and over again. And that's what makes it like just so sad too. It's just like, dude, like all the proof is behind, like showing that you've done this stuff, and yet you want to continue to put money that you don't have into proving something that you don't even believe. So I'm just like, why? That's what makes it so much more difficult. But to go to Salala's point earlier, I just want to say you said you were putting people onto other playlists of other music to, broaden their horizons in the R&B genre and things like that. But I'm just saying, like nobody's replacing R. Kelly. He's the king of R&B, period. Like he's an awful human being. He's an awful person. Awful. I'm not saying I'm listening to his music because I'm not. We did have the same vocal teacher. I did see him at my house multiple times. I did go to his house in Olympia Fields multiple times.
Wow.
But that man is a musical genius. He's also a pedophile. And his music should not, like, in my opinion, should not be listened to for a good amount of time because any of that, you don't even, just from a responsibility point as a black male to me, I'm not going to play it around black women because that's just effed up. Like, that's just wrong. Like, I'm gonna keep it. If I am gonna play it, I'm gonna play it for myself, for my own like soothing memories or whatever. But I feel like I have a responsibility as a Black man to protect my Black women and just not have them going over the things that he's done to other Black women.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know if my mother has thrown out her CDs yet, because R. Kelly was her favorite artist. R. Kelly was the person who my mother connected to as the younger generation of music, because his creations and his skill set was beyond. But I think, and to jump into what Rashaun was saying too, about like, especially in a world, as Nay said, created by white men, sort of for white men, we have a mindset that I think is shifting, that there's not enough space for more people. Like, these people we have to protect because there's not enough opportunities out there. And I think that that's shifting. I think that the fact that anyone can create whatever they want and put it on YouTube and make a name for themselves and all that stuff, the space feels a little bit different now. But I think I was getting a little uncomfortable with that too, because that comes from a place of us allowing for the system set not to be for us, to be the normal, and for us not to attack the system that set those spaces up. Instead, we're saying, okay, with the system we have, this is what we have to deal with, and so that's, I think, where, I agree with R. Kelly's skill set, and I thank him for his contribution, and I move on. You know what I mean? For me, because I have been too close to people who've been manipulated and how he manipulated people. And you can do that. You can do that with the parents, as we've seen all over the place. Michael Jackson, who else, who have, through their power and supposed effect, people allow all sorts of things, where in actuality, there are tons of people that have just as much skill set. And we don't even get to see them because we spend so much time uplifting people who have done wrong. And there's like I don't know, like, I love listening to Michael Jackson. And when same as Zan, if someone starts singing a song from Michael Jackson, I'm like, yes. And sometimes I don't even remember it's Michael Jackson because it's connected to a memory outside of his face or his name, But if I hear someone playing it in a room full of kids and starting new memories in a way, I'm like, okay, okay. Or if I hear R. Kelly on my Bermuda radio station, you better believe I'm about to tweet at him and be like, take this off. We have other people. There are other people now. I don't disagree with you, John Clay, but it makes me uncomfortable that we allow things because we assume that we can't open the space up.
I was gonna keep going back. I'll keep going back to this, like, as a question to you all is, Michael Jackson was accused and acquitted. So are we still staying to like all the documentaries and everything and saying like he did that stuff? It's a loaded question. R. Kelly definitely was convicted. He definitely was wrong. And again, back to what I said when I first started, was like, I'm not using that to protect anybody or anything. And I don't want to mute voices because I know there's a ton of rape, to your point, Zan, that 3% rapists go by, etc. If so, this is what I get back to is like, even though Kobe Bryant was accused, like, I don't know. I just want to answer that right there. Like, are we saying accused is enough for us to like that person is, or to us? Sorry.
To answer your question, Rashaun, I think this what I'm about to say, I think addresses both this Lala's point and your point. I think so. I guess I answer your question first. I think for me, to answer both of y'all, I think it's to each their own kind of thing. And I think what we have to be mindful of is not necessarily projecting what we believe onto other people as well. And the reason why I say that is because I'm gonna use a more palatable example, because I know this is kind of be raw. But take, for example, the whole thing that happened with the CEO of Goya, right? And how like everybody wanted to like, throw out everything and whatnot. But I was like, okay, like to each their own. Because for me, I had Goya products in my home, right? But my mindset is, okay, I just won't go out and buy more, but I'm going to use whatever I have left. Whereas some people are like, basuda, throw it in the car, which is fine. That's fine. If that makes you feel like you're doing something, then okay. But don't come to my house and tell me, oh, you're using Goya products. It's like, boo-boo, I already bought this. My money was already paid for. So the way I see it is like, I'm using listen, that's good seasoning as far as I'm concerned. And yes, I understand what's going on. So for me, I just won't go out and buy more. And I think we have to be mindful that, everyone has their own kind of, way of dealing with things. And as long as we're not offending each other and we're actually like, saying, okay, you're fair to do this, you're fair to do that. Or even if you're in someone's space where you feel offended, communicate. It's like, hey, like, even if you're at my place and it's my season, he's like, okay, I understand. I won't use the Goya. I'll go out and buy something else and I'll use this instead for you. So like, be more like, cohesive and try to be more like, compromise with our beliefs as opposed to being like, okay, you're still using that product. I don't like that. So you need to throw that out. It's like, what are we doing? Like, again, I guess not to, go too far, but even to your point, John, with the R. Kelly thing, I think, that's one of the reasons why I mentioned this point too, is because R. Kelly wrote songs too. And then other artists actually performed songs that people wrote for them. So we can keep digging and digging and digging. And at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you believe what you believe. As long as we're not offending each other, I think that's how I see it.
Okay, so getting into, let's get a little more unky.
Make sure to subscribe to Unk wherever you listen to your podcast and on youtube.com. Look out for next week's episode, Letting Go of Our Heroes Part 2, where we talk about Beyonce and much, much more.